I'm Gavin, and welcome to MLS Fantasy Picks. What's up, everyone? Welcome back to another video. In today's video, we'll be doing a recap of last round and takeaways from a fantasy standpoint. We'll look at key considerations for next round, my locks for the week, who I'm looking at for goalkeepers and defenders with clean sheet hunting, who I'm looking at from a midfielder and forward standpoint with the final third segment, the clearance rack looking at those budget options for the week, and then captains with the armband section, and as always, the weekly poll. So taking a look at how I did on round 11, I had an awesome week. I landed with 103 points for the week, so I had a week rank of 250, and my overall rank now stands at 239, so great to see that jump in rank, and my total score is now at 813. So let's take a look at how the team did. So I did get a few questions on YouTube and Twitter about, my setup, my auto ruse setup that I had. So I do have a video on the auto ruse, just a quick 4 minutes. Go check that out. It's a very helpful, fantasy tactic that a lot of managers use. So the way I set my team up, I had Ivacic on the front end. I like that early matchup for New England, and he kept the clean sheet, so I scrubbed out my goalie here. So for the auto ruse, I basically had 3 players on my bench and then 2 scrubs. So the best 2 out of the 3 would automatically sub in, but on the rare occasion that all 3 did hit, I still had the option to scrub a Vander if I wanted all 3 of my guys from the bench. So that's sort of the approach I took. I had Hani and Heel just to see how they would do. I wasn't too sure. And they had a 7 and a 12, so definitely one of those points. And then Sargent and Agato I sort of scrubbed out, and their points went into there. And for my forwards, I think I initially had Messi and Bouanga starting, but just with Messi's form recently, I wasn't sure, so I put him to the bench. He still got me a 10, so I also put him in, thankfully scrubbing out Evander, as I think he ended on a 1 for the week, which is crazy. So that's sort of how I approached my bench for the week. And then my defenders, I just had them all starting out right. Wagner, unfortunately, with the 2. It was a pretty ugly goal they let in against Montreal. They could have kept the clean sheet there, so unfortunate to see. But also no bonus points from Wagner, so a bit disappointing. Varzi, I think, had the assist there, so I love to see that, even though they didn't keep the clean sheet. And Ahmed, I just missed lineups for this one, so I kept him in. I probably would have put in Tate Johnson, who still ended on a 2. So not too mad about that. So Ahmed, subbed in, still got me 2 points. That's fine with me. And looking at Mihailovic, unfortunate to see his 2 points there. I still have plenty of faith in Mihailovic. I think that maybe it was just the lineup for the week, or DC was feeling good at home. And then my best play of the week was definitely keeping that captain's armband on Espinoza. Seeing the lineup, it looked like he was playing up top with Chicho, and there was no Joseph Martinez in to sort of take away the points, so it was the Espinoza and Arango show. So glad I kept the armband on Espinoza there. And then Arango with the 12 goal and an assist, and then Bouanga as well with the 10 with an assist and plenty of bonus points. So Bouanga is definitely back. So awesome week, glad to see it, happy to keep climbing the ranks. And taking a look at our MLS Fantasy Picks official leagues. So I don't know if there's much change in our open league. Still got Verks up here at the top. Solid scores from everyone in the 90s and 100s. 114 from Paul McCalmy, maybe. Love to see that. We got Verks, Daniels Dogs, Clover Street Ultras, Darta FC, and Nava Pasquende FC. So well done to everyone in the top 5. So looking at our head-to-head league, so Dan Kaus FC still our only team with a perfect record, and then Magnolia Mags as well with the 10-1-0. And then, just very close league throughout. I'm currently sitting at 21. So still anyone's league. And taking a look at last week, just some fantasy takeaways. I know it was 1-1, but I would still target teams that are playing Atlanta. They're not looking too great. Hani still got a 7, so that's good to see. We'll see if Atlanta look to rebound. I'm definitely going to say Carlos Heel is back. He has had goal contributions in maybe the last 3 or 4 games and just is racking up bonus points. I know they had a not too strong opponent in Toronto, but just overall New England are looking good, so keep your eye on Heel. I'm going to say Charlotte's they're struggling a little bit right now. They've got a couple of injuries. Columbus is definitely still strong. I would just say from a fantasy standpoint, it's hard to tell. A lot of players share the wealth in terms of goal scoring and things like that. There's no Cucho like we're used to. So I'll see if anyone really stands out from Columbus. I like targeting their defenders like Farzy and Moreira. But yeah, they sort of, from an offensive standpoint, it's either Rossi, Russell Rowe, whoever up top is getting the goals. I would definitely say Benteke is back, from his injury. He looks great. And I'm also still on Mihailovic, a rough game from a fantasy standpoint, but he's definitely still a solid fantasy player. Miami, I'd say they're definitely got something to fight for. 4-1 win against the Red Bull. So I would continue to look at Messi. We'll look to see if Suarez keeps up his good form, though he did have a good game against the Red Bull. For the Union, it is hard to tell who's going to benefit from a fantasy standpoint. I think we rotated a bit with Open Cup coming up this Wednesday. Also, no, I will be at the Open Cup game on Wednesday. So if you see me, say hello. But from a fantasy standpoint, it's hard to tell. We started really strong with Baribo, but Quinn didn't really have a great game here. And Danley, surprisingly, is adding to the goal contributions. Not sure who to trust yet. Just keep an eye on it there. And then let's see. Yeah, the Chicago-Orlando game was a bit strange. There was a red card, so hard to take much from this. San Diego, they looked great. Lozano is definitely the guy for San Diego. I'm still not sure if I'm going to continue with Dreyer. I mean, he looked fantastic and is definitely contributing a lot for San Diego. I don't know if this was just like a fluke game against Dallas, but Lozano is definitely someone that I'll continue to look at. Buwanga, he's back for LAFC for sure. Continue to look at him. For any San Jose and Portland game, I would just expect goals. I will say DeJuan Jones is playing like a wing-back position for San Jose, so a great addition there. Keep an eye out for him from a fantasy standpoint. But yeah, look at the attackers for both of these sides. Rusnak, he's back, looking great. St. Louis, struggling. And then for Cincinnati, I'm not sure if Evander is in a bit of a slump right now. We'll keep an eye out. I would say for this upcoming round, if anything, he's maybe a bench play for me. But yeah, we'll just have to keep an eye out on Cincinnati. And then the Galaxy, I think, will be struggling even more. It looked like, I think Peck might have picked up an injury as well as Paintsel, maybe some other guys. But yeah, continue targeting teams playing against the Galaxy. Taking a look at key considerations for the rounds, we do have Open Cup, I think, starting on Tuesday and finishing up on Wednesday. We've got some MLS teams playing, usually not all their starters, but just keep an eye out on lineups. So teams that we've got playing this week is Charlotte, DC, Nashville, the Red Bull, Portland, NYCFC, New England, Philly, Minnesota, Orlando, Chicago, St. Louis, Dallas, Austin, Houston, and San Jose. So a good amount of teams. But yeah, just keep an eye out on lineups. I'm not sure how many starters will be playing or the full 90. But yeah, just something to keep in mind. No teams on bye this week. And as always, check for injuries and suspensions before the start of the game week. Taking a look at my locks for the week. These are my favorite players for the week that I will be starting, most likely captaining, and will not be scrubbing out. Looking at my locks for the week. So I haven't been too high on Orellano this season, but I just do like the matchup Cincinnati has against Austin. Austin, from an offensive standpoint, haven't looked great, and Orellano's picking it up a bit in terms of his bonus points and goal contributions. So also for Wagner, he hasn't been too outstanding in terms of his bonus point production, and I'm not expecting a clean sheet against Columbus, especially because Philly is playing in the Open Cup on Wednesday. So yeah, I'm going to still stick with Wagner though, as I don't like a lot of clean sheet chances this week, and he's involved, plenty of crosses, free kicks, things like that. The other lock I have this week at midfield is Mihailovic. So I was very surprised with his 2 points, especially against a DC squad. Maybe it's because they're away, I don't know. But he's at home this week where he does very well. And they're playing San Jose, which aren't known for their defense. So Mihailovic, definitely a lock for me. And then finishing up with forwards, Kuipers, I like a lot. I think it's one of the earliest games of the week, but he's still not going to go on my bench. They're playing Atlanta, who have been struggling. And yes, Chicago's defense isn't fantastic. I do like them from an offensive standpoint, especially since they're playing Atlanta. So these are my favorite keeperoo picks for the week, as well as my defenders that I'll be looking at from a clean sheet perspective and those that have an attacking upside. Looking at clean sheet hunting. So for goalkeepers this week, maybe on the front end of a keeperoo, you could look at Ustari. I know that Miami are away this week, but he's just a cheap option, frees up plenty of budget for you. And I really don't like a lot of the later, like 10 p.m. Sunday games for clean sheets. So that's why I'm recommending looking at those early Saturday games, and then just any game of the later time from 7:30 Eastern on for the back end of your keeperoo. So I like Ustari on the front end. On the back end, I'm more of a fan of the NYCFC keeper with Fries. He looked great against Cincinnati, a lot of fantastic saves, and they're at home against Montreal. Or you could look at the Red Bull, though the Red Bull defensively haven't been the strong Red Bull that we've known from seasons past. They're playing the Galaxy, who are going to be riddled with injuries. So I like that matchup. You could go with Coronel on the back end of a keeperoo there. So pivoting from goalkeepers that I like to defenders that I like. So Valencia is one of my favorites for the Red Bull. I think he was on some corners this past game week and possibly some free kicks. I'm not too entirely sure, but he's more of that attacking type of wing back for the Red Bull. So I like that matchup from an offensive standpoint and a clean sheet option. I also like Freeman. This will be interesting because I think Orlando's last 5 games they've kept clean sheets, and then New England has kept clean sheets in the past 4. Maybe it ends 0-0. Maybe there's plenty of goals on both sides. It's hard to tell. But Freeman has looked great, even with some bonus points, not just clean sheets. And then I even have Feingold as well, as he's also been producing, at least in this last game, with some bonus points too, and he's only 6.8 million. Some other defenders I like are Nahar, as he also gets involved in the attack, and I do like that home matchup against Charlotte. The final third. These are my favorite midfield and forward picks for the week. Moving on to our next segment of the final third. So attackers this week, from a midfield standpoint, I do like Rusnak. I didn't pick him up last week as I wanted to see how he, does now that he's playing the full 90, and he did not disappoint with 13 points. I know he is away, and I don't know if his points didn't look like his points recently have been as strong, or they're not as strong away as they are home. But yeah, it's still a decent matchup against Houston. I'm still a huge fan of Heel. So he'd had an awesome 12 points last week. As I said, New England are clicking. It is going to be an interesting one because both of these teams have had plenty of clean sheets in recent games. So I'm curious if it ends 0-0 or there's plenty of goals. Either way, I still see Heel producing from a fantasy standpoint. Mukhtar as well. While 7 points isn't anything crazy, I do like his home matchup against Charlotte. Charlotte looked to have been struggling recently. If anything, he's a good bench play. Same for Evander. I'm still an Evander fan. He's an amazing player. It's a good matchup against Austin. They're at home. You still want to focus on those home players. And yeah, though it is hard to say, Evander would be a bench play for me, as he put up 1 point and then I think 4 points before. So yeah, still a bit hesitant on Evander, so maybe he's more of a bench play. And from a forward standpoint, of course Messi, you have to go Messi, but outside of Messi, I like Benteke away at Toronto. He's just a force up top. I don't think he played the full 90, but his fitness looks to be back, and Toronto has just been struggling, so I do like that matchup for Benteke. Save for Martinez, he only had 3 points, but that's because he missed a PK. Yeah, he is the main guy for NYC, and they're playing at home against Montreal. Other forwards that I like this week are Navarro from Colorado, a good home matchup against San Jose, and Chucky Lozano with San Diego. I believe San Diego's away at St. Louis, but St. Louis have not looked really good at all, and Lozano looks to be buzzing. So yeah, those are the forwards and midfielders that I like this week. And the clearance rack. These are my favorite budget defender, midfielder, and forward picks for the week. Looking at our clearance rack picks for the week, I won't spend too much time on the defenders as I like them a lot this week. Valencia only 7.5 and Feingold only 6.8. So looking at my midfielders though, Pereira looked great last week with, goal and some bonus points. They are playing Miami, though Miami's defense hasn't looked awesome, and Pereira is definitely becoming that main guy for Minnesota. Valakari as well, he's only 8.3, and if you want to get involved in that San Diego attack without spending the money on Dreyer in the midfield or Chucky Lozano up top at striker, I think Valakari is a decent option. Goal and assist last week with some bonus points. Just keep an eye on lineups to see if he's starting. And then Berhalter, also keep an eye on lineups, but he's only 8.2 and just known to be that guy to help with goal contributions, assists, anything like that. He is just a force in Vancouver's midfield. And then for strikers, some fun picks here. I do like Fernandez from NYCFC. He's only 6.6. A really nice goal last week with some bonus points as well. Good home matchup against Montreal. Then Musovski, I'm curious if he will be playing the full 90, but he's had a great streak of goals these past few games. So I would expect him to continue to see minutes. And yeah, only 6.4. They are away, though they're playing Houston. So if you need someone without spending a lot of money, Musovski, Fernandez, some good options up top. The armband. If you couldn't tell by the picture, this is all about captains this week. Looking at our captains, or my favorite captains for the week, it worked out for me last week with, call it a differential captain of Espinoza instead of Messi. I don't know if it'll work out this week, as Mihai put up a 2 last week, but I like his home matchup against San Jose, so he's one of my favorite captain picks for this week. Kuipers as well, bit of a stretch, though he is putting up some bonus points, which is good to see from a forward standpoint. And then Messi's probably your safest option. I was curious if he'd continue, being in good form with 4 and a 5 from a fantasy standpoint, but he got a 10 last week, so you like to see that. So yeah, definitely a safe captain pick for you this week. Let's take a look at the weekly poll. Finishing things off with the weekly poll, so let's take a look at how the poll went last round for round 11. So we got 40 votes, so thanks everyone for voting, and if you haven't voted yet, be sure to vote in this week's poll. So the question was, who scores more points in round 11, Mihailovic or Vander? Both were away, both were 11.2 million, and the majority of the votes went for Mihailovic. And yeah, I'd have to say, if you picked Mihailovic, you were right. But funnily enough, those points that they did score, let's hop over to Evander. He got 1 point, which is crazy. And then Mihailovic got 2 points. So congrats to those who voted for Mihailovic. As you were correct, as Mihailovic scored 2 and Evander only scored 1 point. So yeah, not the norm from these two. Strange to see, but we'll keep an eye out on how they continue throughout the rest of the season. So that moves us on to our poll for round 12. So who scores more points in MLS Fantasy round 12? I've got another 2 away midfielders. So Albert Rusnak, who absolutely popped off last week, and Heel, who has been very consistent these past few weeks. Both are away. Very similar in price point. Rusnak's 12.2, Heel's 11.1. Who do you think will score more points in round 12? Be sure to vote on my YouTube channel. All right, so that wraps it up for me this week. Hope this was helpful. And as always, good luck.